So today I'm excited to be talking about the Documenting Indigenous Languages at MIT project, which is a collaborative effort involving CREOS, the DDC, and the MIT Digital Humanities Lab. It was prompted by the challenges of dealing with the afterlives of linguistic data in material repositories, specifically the papers of the late Kenneth Locke Hale, professor of linguistics at MIT. Throughout his lifetime, Hale worked to document languages of Aboriginal Australians, American Indians, and indigenous languages in Central America. Hale also participated in language reclamation through the use of historical archives. Pictured here is MIT's copy of the so-called Eliot Indian Bible, which was the earliest translation of the Christian Bible into an indigenous American language and the first Bible in any language published in the Western Hemisphere. Translated by Puritan minister John Eliot into the language variously known as Massachusetts, Natick, or Wampanoag, the Bible was published just up the road from us in Harvard Yard in 1663. It found renewed interest in the 1990s as the foundational textual repository used to reconstruct the Wampanoag language native to Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard, which had ceased to be spoken in the 19th century. As a colonial object whose primary utility had been extinguished for over a century, the Eliot Indian Bible emphasizes the forgetness of material history. There was a period of 150 years where no one alive could read its text. One of the last hallmarks of Kenneth Hale's career was the arrival of a student hailing from Mashpee, Massachusetts, which is regarded as Cape Cod's Indian town. You might know that they host a famous powwow every July. In 1992, Jessie Littledoe had a series of dreams. For 3 consecutive nights, she encountered a circle of people who looked like her, speaking a language she could not recognize. A lifelong resident of Mashpee, she later passed a road sign for the neighboring village of Sipwisset, and seeing the traditional writing, she realized that her visions had been about Wampanoag, the language that her ancestors had spoken when they encountered the Pilgrims at Plymouth Plantation. But just 2 centuries after the Mayflower's arrival, her language had fallen out of lived memory. By the fall of 1996, Jessie Littledoe had been accepted as a community fellow at MIT, and her interest in Wampanoag brought her to Ken Hale's office. They set to work reconstructing her language that same afternoon, and despite having no prior linguistics training, Jessie Littledoe formally entered the Master of Linguistics program a year later in the fall of 1997. As mentioned earlier, the key resource for their language reconstruction work, in addition to a number of written documents from the period, was the Eliot Bible, which was a translation into Wampanoag of the Geneva Bible. A textual analysis provided 60,000 base words in Wampanoag, whose meaning had to be deduced via comparison with the original English. A first draft of the Wampanoag dictionary was produced in 2001, and after the first decade of work, the dictionary contained more than 11,000 entries. Privileged as a prized part of MIT's rare book collection, the Eliot Bible is a relic of history, part of a colonial project that had the consequence of destroying the language in which it is set. It exists now as a linguistic time capsule, one that we are collectively still trying to figure out how to unpack. And given the nature of the text involved, questions of consent from stakeholder communities have been at the forefront of our discussions of how to treat the Bible. But as a textual assemblage, the linguistic data reflected in the Bible is complex. Although it is colloquially called the Wampanoag Bible because of the language reclamation work, linguist Norman Richards, who succeeded Ken Hale at MIT, is quick to point out that the actual vocabulary in the text reflects interactions with communities throughout Eastern and Central Massachusetts. So when we think about this linguistic data, the Eliot Indian Bible and Kenneth Hale's papers call into question how sensitive material should be made public, if at all. We must ask what constraints should be put in place to ensure that the afterlives of collected data are properly managed. At the same time, Hale recognized the significance of historic language repositories like the Bible and how they were essential for language reclamation. He viewed the sum of these repositories as essential for realizing the full scope of human existence. As Anak Olin, a recent Indigenous master's student in MIT linguistics, put it, "The wisdom of my ancestors has been preserved in the language. If we lose our language, we lose our ability to see into the minds of the people who were able to thrive for millennia." So that's a brief overview of our work. Here's a list of our project participants. This work will be continuing into the fall, into next year. And our hope is to produce a critical introduction to the Bible with plans to hopefully put the Bible online, hosted by MIT. So thank you for listening.